When you begin to open up these letters and work on processing them, and to see these names that you read about in history books, and you can touch a piece of paper that they actually put a pen to, I find it gets pretty exciting, because it links that bridge across the centuries. My name is Robert Williams. I'm General Secretary of the General Commission on Archives and History of the United Methodist Church. The script, while it's a beautiful script, sometimes is a bit challenging to read.
It is. You almost have to get used to it as time.
One of the most exciting acquisitions that we have been able to get in the last year and a half are about 1,000 letters, most of them to Bishop Gilbert Haven. He was a bishop from 1872 to 1880. Prior to that, he had been editor of Zion's Herald and a teacher. But his importance is that he was one of the most vocal abolitionists in the mid-19th century for the Methodist Episcopal Church. The Methodist Episcopal Church, in its leadership, tended to support the colonization movement, which would have been taking freed slaves, free African Americans, and repatriate them to Africa. Bishop Gilbert Haven, on the other hand, was one of the very few who argued not only for the end of slavery, but also for full social integration of African Americans, even defended interracial marriage, supported the ordination of women when it was not done. So he was an extraordinarily progressive figure, and how much we would wish that we would have his voice to be heard even today. 150 years later, his comments, his sermons on national issues would be just as relevant. And in this collection of letters which we received from descendants of Bishop Gilbert Haven, there are letters from Bishop Matthew Simpson suggesting where Gilbert Haven should serve, several letters from Frederick Douglass, the great African American abolitionist, letters from President Ulysses Grant and the Vice President, letters from William Lloyd Garrison, the great abolitionist who published The Liberator. Not that William Lloyd Garrison and Gilbert Haven saw eye to eye, but they were certainly allies in this great cause.
And so Douglass here is talking about being in Baltimore and kind of almost being in fear of his life at times.
I have been threatened with violence here, and no doubt that if I could be caught in the dark, I might receive an unlucky blow.
And this is one from Douglass, and he's referring to kind of his issues or the disputes with then President Andrew Johnson. The assumption among Douglass and others is that President Andrew Johnson was significantly less in favor of black voting rights, or really indeed black rights at all, in the aftermath of the war, and so many abolitionists almost considered him to be pro-Confederate.
There was more letter writing in the 19th century than more recent years, but for the family to have saved that much, 1,000 letters is unusual to get something of that size. Some of them were quite mundane, but what was striking was who they were coming from. One letter, for example, either William Lloyd Garrison or Frederick Douglass was writing to Gilbert Haven saying, we think our good friend Sojourner Truth is staying somewhere on Cape Cod. Strictly mundane, where is Sojourner Truth? But here you get this picture that they're just writing to each other, trying to keep track of each other. Nothing exciting, nothing world-shaking, but Sojourner Truth's name comes up. Or when the Vice President was adding a note for Haven to go to Mexico saying, I know Gilbert Haven and he's a good guy. You know, you can host him well. But what makes this really significant are the issues that are involved. It's not just a letter from the 1850s, 1860s. These are issues that are still with us. How to have racial justice, how to have liberty and justice for all. And these letters just bring it alive that there have been those Methodists that have cared about this across the decades and across the centuries.
This video was brought to you by the people of the United Methodist Church through World Service donations.